They called me a failure, laughing at how I spent my days folding napkins and arranging simple things. But that day when Admiral Richardson looked at me and said, "Welcome back, Commander," everything changed. The dining room felt smaller than usual that evening, filled with the familiar sounds of my family's success stories. My sister Sarah was describing her latest promotion at the law firm, her voice carrying that tone she reserved for achievements. My brother Michael chimed in about his new consulting contract, the numbers impressive enough to draw nods of approval from around the table. Before I share what happened next, I want to know you're here with me. Just say listening in the comments or let me know where you are. I love hearing how far my story reaches. I sat quietly at the far end, my hands resting on the white cloth napkins I had been folding earlier. The fabric was crisp, each crease precise, but to them it just looked like busy work. Something to keep my hands occupied since I had nothing real to contribute to these conversations. "Still playing with napkins, I see," Michael said, not unkindly but with that protective older brother tone that somehow made it worse. "You know there are actual jobs out there, right?" Sarah laughed softly. "Maybe we should help you write a resume. I mean, napkin folding has to count as something." Mom reached over and patted my hand. "Honey, we just want to see you doing something with your life. Something that matters." I nodded, accepting their concern the way I always did. They meant well. They looked at my quiet days, my simple routines, my preference for staying home rather than networking or climbing ladders, and they saw stagnation. They saw waste. What they didn't see was the way I automatically scanned every room I entered, noting exits and potential threats. They didn't notice how I kept my back to walls or how my posture remained perfectly straight even when I was trying to appear relaxed. They missed the disciplined way I folded those napkins, each one exactly like the last, muscle memory from years of military precision. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. The Veterans Memorial Foundation was hosting their annual recognition dinner, and somehow my name had made it onto the guest list. I stared at the elegant cardstock, running my thumb along the embossed seal. "What's that?" Sarah asked, glancing over my shoulder. "Just an invitation to some veteran thing," I said, sliding it back into the envelope. "Are you going?" Mom looked hopeful. "It might be good for you to get out, meet some people." I thought about the last time I had been in a room full of uniforms, the weight of responsibility I once carried, the decisions that kept me awake some nights even now. Maybe. The evening of the dinner, I dressed carefully. Not in uniform. Those days were behind me, but in the simple black suit I kept for occasions like this. My family barely looked up when I announced I was leaving. "Try to have fun," Sarah called from the couch, not lifting her eyes from her laptop. The community center had been transformed, round tables draped in white cloth, small American flags at each place setting. I found my table near the back, grateful for the relative anonymity. The room filled slowly with men and women of various ages, some in dress uniforms, others in civilian clothes like mine. That's when I saw him approaching, his admiral's uniform immaculate, his bearing unmistakable even across a crowded room. Admiral Richardson moved through the crowd with purpose, and I felt my chest tighten with recognition. It had been 3 years since I last saw him, 3 years since I walked away from everything I had built in the Navy. My mind drifted back to that final briefing room, fluorescent lights humming overhead as I placed my resignation letter on his desk. "Commander, you're making a mistake," he had said, his weathered face creased with concern. "The Navy needs leaders like you." I had wanted to explain about Mom's diagnosis, about how she needed someone home while she fought her battle with cancer. I wanted to tell him about the sleepless nights when she called out in confusion, forgetting where she was, needing the steady presence of someone who wouldn't leave. But operational security meant my family could never know the real reason I had been away so much, could never understand that those business trips were actually classified missions in places I couldn't name. So I simply said, my family needs me more, knowing he would see it as abandonment of duty rather than the highest form of service I could offer. The transition home had been harder than any combat deployment. My family saw my return not as sacrifice, but as failure. Here was their son, their brother, who had disappeared for years into some vague military career they never quite understood, now home and seemingly directionless. While they built their civilian careers, I spent my days learning a different kind of precision. The napkin folding they mocked was actually origami therapy, something I had discovered helped with the hypervigilance that came with command stress. Each fold required focus, demanded the same attention to detail that had once meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Those quiet mornings when they thought I was wasting time, I was actually managing the transition symptoms that most veterans never talk about. The way crowds felt overwhelming after years of tactical awareness. The way sudden noises made my hand instinctively reach for weapons that weren't there. The way I woke at 0500 every morning, body clock still set to military time. But I couldn't explain any of this without revealing classified details about operations that officially never happened. I couldn't tell them about the commendations locked away in a safe deposit box, or the grateful letters from foreign diplomats whose lives my team had saved, or the strategic plans I had authored that helped reshape naval operations in 3 different theaters. Mom's health had improved, slowly but steadily, with someone reliable always nearby. She never knew that the same hands folding her napkins had once coordinated rescue operations in hostile waters. She never realized that the son she worried about disappointing her was the same officer who had been personally thanked by 2 different secretaries of defense. Admiral Richardson was closer now, weaving between tables, and I could see recognition dawning in his eyes. My stomach clenched as I realized this moment would change everything. The careful balance I had maintained, the protective silence that kept my family safe from questions about my service, was about to shatter. He stopped directly in front of my table, his gaze locking onto mine with the intensity one remembered from operational briefings. The conversations around us began to fade as other veterans noticed his focused attention. "Commander," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet section of the room. The Admiral's voice cut through the dining room chatter like a blade. "Welcome back, Commander." Then he did something that made my breath catch. Admiral Richardson, a man who outranked nearly everyone in that room, came to attention and rendered a perfect salute. The gesture rippled outward as other veterans recognized what was happening, rising from their seats, hands moving to their hearts or foreheads in respect. I stood slowly, muscle memory taking over as I returned the salute with the precision that had been drilled into me years ago. The room had gone completely silent now, hundreds of eyes watching this exchange they didn't fully understand, but somehow recognized as significant. "Admiral," I said simply, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Richardson addressed the room, his command voice carrying to every corner. "You are in the presence of one of the finest officers I have ever had the privilege to serve with. Commander Sarah Mitchell led Operation Neptune's Shield, the mission that prevented a humanitarian catastrophe in the South China Sea. Her tactical brilliance saved 47 civilian vessels and avoided an international incident that could have changed the course of history." The weight of those words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. I felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that combat had never made me feel. These people were learning things about me that my own family had never known, could never know until this moment. My phone buzzed insistently in my pocket. Text messages from my family, who were undoubtedly watching the live stream the Veterans Foundation always broadcast of their events. I could imagine their faces, the confusion and shock as they processed what they were hearing. The commander left active duty not because she lacked dedication, the Admiral continued, but because she understood that sometimes the greatest service requires the deepest sacrifice. She chose family over personal glory, chose quiet strength over public recognition. The applause started slowly, then built into something thunderous. Veterans throughout the room stood, their faces reflecting understanding and respect. They knew the weight of choosing between duty and family, the impossible decisions that came with leadership. Later that evening, I found myself back at the family dinner table, but everything felt different. The napkins I had folded earlier were still there, but now my siblings looked at them with new eyes. Sarah kept staring at me as if seeing a stranger, while Michael sat unusually quiet. "Why didn't you tell us?" Mom finally asked, her voice soft with something between hurt and awe. "Some stories can only be told when the time is right," I said, reaching for her hand. And some service is too important to risk with words. My phone continued buzzing with messages from former colleagues, old friends from the service who had seen the broadcast. The carefully maintained boundaries between my military life and civilian life were dissolving, but somehow that felt like freedom rather than loss. Sarah leaned forward, studying my face. All those times we thought you were just floating. You were dealing with classified military stress. I was learning to be your sister again instead of Commander Mitchell, I said. Some transitions take time. The evening wound down differently than our family gatherings usually did. Instead of scattered conversations about individual achievements, we sat together in comfortable quiet. They asked careful questions about what I could share, respecting the boundaries that would always exist around certain parts of my service. As I prepared to leave, Mom hugged me tighter than usual. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "Both versions of you." Walking to my car, I thought about the napkins still sitting on their dining room table. Tomorrow I would fold more, not because I had nothing better to do, but because the precision and focus helped me carry the weight of secrets and service with dignity. The Admiral was right. Sometimes the greatest strength is shown not in the battles we win, but in the quiet grace with which we carry our victories home.